Hey, Off-Season After Dark fans, glad to have you here for episode 37. And we have another venture into the Sun Belt Conference. Today we have Ben with us from the Trojan Wall to talk about Troy football and one of the pleasant surprises in the Sun Belt last year, to just, dive into everything Coach Parker's been doing there and see what the offseason has brought for them. So, Ben, glad to have you here. I wanted to welcome you. Why don't you tell the viewers a little bit about what got you into the space and covering Troy and how long you've been a fan and where they can find you?
All right, so I'll get the easiest out of the way first. On Twitter, I've been on sports and been running that since about 2009. But I've been going to Troy stuff since about 2001. That was whenever I got to go to my first game. And so it's been a minute since we started this journey. But back around 2018 or so, when Forgotten Five was still around, they had started the Trojan Wall, Scott Watkins and Thomas Gleaton, and then I kind of got on board with that. And so Thomas and I have been running it pretty much since then, just writing things that we find interesting and trying to tell different parts of Troy's history. I've just recently been working on something to do with Title IX and the expansion of women's athletics there. So there's been a ton of things that we've learned. I did a whole history of the stadium, the football stadium. But it's
nice.
Pretty much been just, I wanted to, and this is the same thing for Thomas. We both wanted to write a lot of the things that we didn't really get to read about Troy elsewhere. So it's kind of well, if no one else is doing it, we will.
And their stadium, Veterans, is pretty old, isn't it? If I remember correctly.
So it opened in, it's kind of murky on that. Sometimes it'll show 1950, sometimes 1951. Okay. Most of what I found was 51 was the first season.
Okay. How did, one thing about that, I saw that it was named Veterans, but then it was Movie Gallery Stadium. Then it went back to Veterans. Was that a sponsorship or what was the name change there?
Yeah. So it's kind of a thing that is not officially official, but Troy's stadium naming rights is kind of cursed. So in 1998, a guy named Richard Scrushy, he sponsored the field. It was Richard M. Scrushy Field at Veterans Memorial Stadium. And he was the CEO of Health South. And he eventually went to prison for some corruption that was there. So we didn't have naming rights as we transitioned into FBS. And then starting in 2003, I think it was, Movie Gallery, which was headquartered out of Dothan, they came along. They were like, we'll pledge this money so that you guys can renovate and help finish expanding the stadium. And then Movie Gallery went out of business within about 4 years. So I kind of just like Veterans Memorial Stadium at this point so that we don't drive anybody else out of business.
That's probably a smart move based on that history.
Yeah.
I did not know that. I'm glad to pick that up. But one of the things I had mentioned was, at least for me last year, I was surprised that Troy was as good as they were. I did not expect them to win the West going into last year.
Right.
Going into it, I remember on this show, I had a Louisiana guest and then a ULM guest. And I told both of them, I kind of figured the Cajuns would repeat as division champs. But then Troy came in last year in year two with Gerad Parker and were really good in the conference, and especially in those division games. They were tough last year. So kind of maybe for our listeners that aren't as familiar with Troy, can you tell us a little bit about, when there was that coaching opening after Summerall left, Parker came in, and what's it been like since then in that roughly 2-year period?
So really the thing with Parker was he was such an unknown. There was a large contingent, myself included, that was really thinking Jordan Leslie from West Virginia was going to be the guy. It was kind of like Summerall. His name had been floated before and it didn't work. So it was like, okay, well, now this time it might be him. But ended up Parker was the guy. And, he's got connections to Kentucky, which means he has connections to Neil Brown, connections to John Sumrall. So there's connections to success and to talent there. And then that first year, really, I think it had more to do with the dearth of talent that we didn't have anymore than it did to what was actually in the locker room. I always hate to use that first year because you don't really know what's going on there. You don't know what's personnel, I should say, not necessarily the talent.
Especially in the modern game.
Exactly.
At G6 schools where your roster can get totally gutted in a situation like that. I mean, we had it at Marshall last year. You win the conference, and then the next year you don't go to a bowl game.
Exactly. And so, he goes 4-8, but there was signs of life. The Georgia Southern game was one where we really looked at it and was like, okay, that's what we can be. And then really, I think it was about the Clemson game.
Even that year, that it was early in the year, but you guys looked okay against Iowa in that, that.
Yeah, it was, the first half was good. It just, Iowa's Iowa. They're going to kind of just do their thing until they finish you off, kind of like an anaconda. Yeah. But, it was the Clemson game this past year where it was like, okay, this is similar to 2016 when we almost beat them. We came out showing a lot more than we expected, which honestly kind of echoed Neil Brown, where I think he was 5-7 this first year, and then had that real great showing against Clemson, and then things kind of just started going from there. And there were still issues throughout the season. We had quarterback play that wasn't always up to where we would want it. We also had times where you would have the defense that would bend a little too much and would end up breaking, but we also had injuries. So there were a whole lot of things that didn't necessarily work as well as we might have wanted it early on in the year, but it just started gelling towards the end, and we started getting some wins that we didn't necessarily know we were going to get. We still had some odd games, like we probably shouldn't have lost to ULM, but which it's ULM. But
they're also one of those teams now with Vincent, where with the slow pace of play that they do, they're going to pick a couple teams off every year because they're not getting blown out as much. Like they're just the way they play is conducive to having tighter games. And
if they can ever get, honestly, their finances right, ULM could do really well. It's just they've got to work that out before anything can really get situated there. But overall,
that's my worry with La Tech coming in the conference. And I was more, a lot of people were really against Tech. I actually was okay with it, but we have to know they're going to be able to spend and stay competitive in that regard.
Right. And, that's one of those things where I keep hearing all these rumors about, the amount of money that ULM does or doesn't have. And I hope it's that they stay. I like ULM being in the conference. I do think they're a good fit. It's just that aspect has to get worked out. But I do think them hiring Brian Vincent was a fantastic hire. In fact, I think it was UAB was in the mix for him. The fact they didn't pick him up instead
he was the interim at UAB after the Bill Clark Health stuff, and then they didn't hire him when they hired Dilfer.
Right, and UAB's got a big kick in themselves because you can see where that's got them. But it's something I think if they can get those things, Bryant Vincent's going to have ULM, if not contending for the West, they're going to be contending for a bowl game every single year at least.
Yeah, I think I hate to say this of another conference team, but the bar for them is so low. If you go to a bowl game 3 of 5 years and maybe contend for the Division I of those 5, that's probably pretty good for a situation like ULM, where if you can get your cycle of the guys you're going to have for 4 or 5 years, you keep them at ULM, and you can have that 1 year where everything clicks. That's probably what you got to shoot for. It's not going to be perennially being a contender.
Yeah, no, and I think that's kind of where they need to, and I say kind of need to. They may already be like that. I don't know what SJ Tui is going to be working on there, but I think you're right. If they can just get to a point where consistency in keeping players and getting some talent there, it would be very good. Like what was it? Ahmad Hardy was there as a running back.
He was,
Just fantastic back. If they keep him 2 or 3 years, then I think that accelerates it. Because you obviously saw what he was able to do at Missouri.
Yeah, I mean, he one of the 3 best running backs in the country right
sure.
now, you would say. But just you worry for them, is that going to be every year? Every time you have a good freshman, are you going to lose them right away? And that's not only the case for them, even G6 schools with way more resources are also in that boat. But like last year, you lost. We were talking about UAB, Braylon McReynolds, their starting running back transferred there, and one of your starting receivers transferred to UCF. I mean, these are not powerhouse programs you're losing guys to. That's what you can't have if you're Vincent.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. But then, so that was a little bit about 2024, Parker's first year. Now let's move forward to last year, 2025, where it all pretty much seemed to go right. Right.
So again, that was one of those things where early on there was, them not gelling very well, but excuse me, I think it was after about that Arkansas State game, things just kind of clicked and they just went on that run. And then things just fell our way too. Because I feel like sometimes when it comes to Sunbelt with the divisions, it's not just that there's always one team dominating that division. Sometimes it's, hey, this team was good, but also this team lost and that team lost. And so the dominoes just kind of fall the way they do. And honestly, I personally, obviously I'm biased, I prefer whenever Troy is the dominant champion, but at the same time, there was some excitement in going into that last weekend against Southern Miss, knowing that whoever won that would win the West. And so it was like this added layer of intrigue to that matchup, which, us at the Trojan Wall, we tried to.
The year before with Marshall, going to JMU and they went to OT and you win that game, you're going to the conference title game. Yeah.
Exactly. And so there's just a magic about that and an excitement in how much those games mean, not just to the fans, but to those players.
Yeah. It was kind of interesting last year. You guys had went on that heater and then you dropped the 2 in a row to Arkansas State. And was ODU the second one? I forget.
I'd have to go back and look at the full schedule, but the ODU game was.
You dropped the 2 in a row, and then you won the last 2. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, the ODU game hurt mainly because, especially in the lower or worse years, I'll say, one of the things that I would always keep up with is, hey, we didn't get shut out. Hey, we didn't get shut out. And so every once in a while, when we'd have one of those, if we were playing poorly, I would put hey, we avoided a shutout. We haven't been shut out since. And I forgot the exact date, but basically we hadn't been shut out since 2014 when Georgia beat us 66-0. Okay. And then ODU came in.
It was November 13th, my birthday.
Right. Nice. Yeah. So we had been 12 years of not being shut out, and then we couldn't buy a point. So that one was a pretty rough game to go through. But
the one I skipped over was sorry to cut you off.
No,
you guys had Clemson on the ropes earlier in the year.
Right. And so that was where I kind of looked at it and was like, okay, this could be something. I wasn't getting my hopes up because I still was at a point where I was like, if we make a bowl, I'm happy. Just to go from 4 wins to at least 6, maybe 7 or 8, then that'd be okay. But Clemson was like, okay, we might be able to do something in the West. And we might be able to get to a really decent bowl, kind of go from there. Wasn't sure if we get, to double-digit wins or anything, but I was like, this could be something. Eventually, we're finally going to get Clemson, though.
Yeah. And then, that Memphis game didn't play as well there, but going to Buffalo and beating a pretty good team there, Pete Lembo's a heck of a coach. That was a big win for you guys last year.
Oh, for sure. Anytime that you're able to go into somebody's house and beat them, it's a huge thing. It's another when it's a peer conference. We already played Buffalo, before. That was back in 2018.
Okay.
So it was just kind of a second. Yeah, that was the Dollar General Bowl that year. So it was kind of a secondary matchup here. We got to play them again, and we have to travel so far, and to be able to go up there and get that done. And it wasn't as if we went up there and did it handily. It was a claw at tooth and nail type of situation. So that was another thing where you could see the guys starting to go, all right, this is kind of what we need to do. This is where we need to go from here. And I think it was a building blocks. There was no, I will say this. Now, I don't think there was one game where it immediately clicked, but it was, all right, there's this, there's this, there's this. And then it just ended up paying off of that West Championship.
And with the teams that are well coached, it rarely is one moment where it clicks. Right. It usually is an overtime, consistent growth, and it eventually happens. It's not a light bulb moment where it turns on. And I think that's in part because Parker knows what he's doing. And okay, this week we got better at this. We have to work on this. Well, if you continually over time chip away at those weaknesses, you're going to have a good finished product.
For sure.
Yeah. So then, last year, fortunate enough to, like you said, beat Southern Miss in that last game of the year for the division, go to the conference title game against JMU. Then we have the All-Alabama Bowl in Montgomery against Jacksonville State, which I'm blanking what bowl. It was something military related, wasn't it?
The IS4S Salute to Veterans Bowl.
That's a good
It really
one.
rolls off the tongue.
It does, yeah. And around last year, later in the regular season, I had a guys to do a Jacksonville State podcast on State of the Gamecocks, and they were great.
Yeah, I'm familiar with them on Twitter.
Oh yeah, they do good work. But this was before the bowl game was even announced, so we didn't know that was going to happen yet. But another game, that game was a battle. You guys fell short, but it could have went either way. I know they got that touchdown in the fourth to win, but hey, sometimes that happens.
Yeah, I will say that's probably, in the 25 years I've been a Troy fan, that is I'd say the second hardest bowl loss. The only one worse would probably be the 2008 New Orleans Bowl, whenever we lost in overtime to Southern Miss. But that one was hard because it was the first time we played JSU in 25 years. I know that for a fact because the first game I went to as a Troy fan was the last Jack State game before this one. So it's been that long.
That's cool. Okay.
So it was one of those where I'm like, all right, well, that's a little brother. We got to beat him. And, respect to JSU, respect to Charles Kelly. They came out, they had a game plan, and they implemented it. You could tell that they wanted that win. And, we'll just have to get them on the schedule and beat them back.
Yeah. Yeah. They're G6 wise. They're not anybody's little brother anymore. I'm very impressed with how they've transitioned to FBS.
Yeah, they did do a very, I like trash talking them, especially with like State of the Gamecocks and a few of the other ones. Yeah. But, I will give them respect whenever I have to. They did do a good job with how they transitioned. And I knew they'd be good. Outside of UAB sometimes and South most of the time, we don't play bad football here in the state of Alabama. So if you give a team here a shot, they're going to play well.
Auburn, but that's
Well, they.
I only say that for our Auburn viewers, for our group show that we love to tease. Yeah.
You're
so right. It's the standards are pretty. UAB certainly been on a lull recently, but really they were good under Bill Clark. And
for sure.
You brought up that's an interesting point that all of the conferences there, or all the schools in Alabama that are FBS, have had their moments recently. They've all been pretty solid. That's I didn't think of it. That's a good way to put it, though. Yeah.
I mean, when you look at it, obviously Auburn and Alabama have, and Troy have won conference championships. UAB won conference championships. South's the only one that
State did
hasn't.
last year.
Jacksonville State won theirs last year. Yeah. So everybody's won one except for South. But you just know that, again, we may not be a Texas or a California or an Ohio when it comes to the levels of talent necessarily in the state, but we love us some football here. And so it's going to be good.
You mentioned their winning conferences, and you talked about everybody but South. That's a good segue, I think, to talk about. You had tweeted or quote tweeted some about the parity that's in the Sun Belt Conference. I was fascinated by it. So, what was over the years? What was the and how many champions have there been?
The original tweet said that I think it was since 1977, only about 6 schools had won the SEC championship. And so I was like, okay, that's not much parity. So I look, and since 2001, when the Sun Belt had their first year, they've been, now granted, some of the early ones up to 2018 when the championship games were started, they were split championships, but I think it was 13 different champions in 25 years, as opposed to the 6 in roughly 50 years.
Yeah. So
it's one of those things where, again, I know parity isn't necessarily the only thing, and it doesn't necessarily make a conference good, but it's nice to know that almost any team, South, can win the Sun Belt. They just have to be in the right place and have the things go the right way.
Yeah. Well, I think the other one I had come across before I saw yours, and this was a couple months back, but I think going back, it was 9 or 10 seasons. The MAC has only had 2 repeat.
Right.
Miami, Ohio did it twice. Western Michigan after last year, that was their second. So tremendous amounts of parity in the MAC and Sun Belt, which I think goes to what we were talking about before. When you have the last game of the regular season is for a division title, that usually shows parity.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, there could be a rare case where it's just the 2 best teams line up that week. But it to me, it shows that there are a lot of competitive teams in each of those conferences. And it's certainly true for the Sun Belt. I mean, going into this year, maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, you look at in the East, I don't think Georgia State is going to be very good. And I have doubts about Coastal. There's a lot of transition there.
Right.
Everybody else could be competitive. Now, in the West, I think you guys got a leg up on most, but Louisiana should be solid. UL Monroe should get better. Arkansas State, they'll be losing Rainer hurt, but I think they'll be okay. And Southern Miss, they lost Huff, but I think there'll be continuity with Anderson. Like there's going to be competitions in both divisions, I think.
I think so. I think you're going to see a little bit more of an opportunity for a new champion in the division in the West than you will in the East. With the West, like you said, Anderson's there with Southern Miss. I don't think they ended up losing as much as Marshall did after Huff left.
No.
But you've got that. I really think that Butch Jones, if he's not actually actively working for a division title, he's going to play spoiler.
Yeah.
He's kind of done that pretty much every year he's been there.
They're a high floor team. They're never going to just crap out under him.
Right.
Yeah.
They're always going to be competitive. But also, with Louisiana, they've got, Desermo. He's one where I know he knows what it's like to win because he won while he was there as a player, but it's been kind of up and down, and I don't know how much the transfer portal and NIL's affecting that, but they're always at play.
It's interesting with him. He was 10-4 the one year. He's been 6-7 the other 3 years. Yeah. So you wonder another year like that, how much patience are they going to have for him?
Right.
I don't know.
And I mean, Louisiana likes to win. So
they do. Yeah. And now let's, while we're on that, topic there, the new kids in the conference, Louisiana Tech. First of all, how did you feel about adding them? Because, me, nominally, with Marshall, I'm an East guy now. And I felt like most people in the East did not want to add La Tech. I actually thought it was kind of cool. I think they were a decent addition. Mm-hmm. What were your thoughts in it, in a team who geographically is closer to them?
So I wasn't really necessarily a fan of the addition as it was coming out. The thing that we've always kind of done with the Sun Belt is there was no more than 2 teams in a state. So Louisiana had 2 teams. Alabama had 2 teams. You could have kind of counted the Carolinas together because you had App and Coastal. Georgia had 2 teams, but there's never really a third. And so I didn't really like the idea of that. I felt like there were better options that we could have went with, but I don't think the option was going to come, which I personally want Western Kentucky back. I hated when they left. I loved playing against them, and I'd love to see them back in the conference.
And most of the people in the East, their take was they either wanted WKU or ECU as that team.
Oh, I would have loved ECU. ECU, I think, would have been a absolute coup if we could have gotten it.
The one where ECU seemed, especially in the people that also care about baseball, they like ECU a lot.
Yeah. And so, and that's the thing. Now, granted, I'll be first one to tell you I'm a football guy, so that's typically where I'm at.
Me
but
too.
I do try to follow all the other sports. And, with the Sun Belt, the idea of ECU coming in was huge because we've already got such a good baseball conference. And so I was on board with that.
In some ways, they fit with us because, you feel like the American, it's the smaller schools in the bigger markets, whereas Sun Belt is college towns. Greenville, North Carolina is a college town.
Oh, for sure. Yes. And it does feel like they're a little misplaced as far as that goes. But that being said, now that they're in the conference, the only thing I can't really say too much about them is Troy doesn't have any real history with La Tech. So I don't hate them. I don't like them. I'm kind of ambivalent at this point. The one I will shout out is there is a guy on Twitter, and even before I dealt with anything with tech, I somehow came across him. This guy who runs an account called Go Tech, Please Don't Die. That guy was fantastic follow.
Yeah.
So he's like my favorite tech person.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm ready to see what they can do as long as they come in and they're competitive. Not competitive enough to beat my team, but as long as they're competitive, they make a good showing, then I'm happy with it.
And they were 8-5 last year under Sonny Cumbie. And going into last year, everything was there that I figured they'd be a lot better, and they were. But now I'm not patting us on the back over CUSA, but week to week, it's a much more competitive conference. So we'll see. Can you put that together every week over an 8-game conference or 9-game conference season? Yeah.
And it's really what Sonny Cumbie can do, because I was looking at their record whenever I was kind of doing some research on them, and I want to say it was like the past 3 seasons before last year, it was either 5 or 6 wins every time, and then last year they popped off with that 8-5 win season. So if he can keep that momentum, which I think he can, I like Sonny Cumbie, he's a good coach, but that would be really the tell.
I'm going to look at their schedule this year because honestly, well, they're certainly not ducking anybody for paychecks.
No.
The non-con, they're playing Louisiana, LSU, Baylor, Army.
Yeah.
So then
Army, if I'm not bad mistaken, I think this is the 3rd straight year that they'll play Army. They played them in 2 bowls and then regular season this year.
That's interesting.
And I think it was
kind of cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a nice little rubber match, I guess.
Yes, because 2 years ago, Marshall was going to play Army in Shreveport in the bowl game. Then we had to back out, and Tech opted in and played that game.
Yep.
Yes. I forgot about that. Yeah. Yeah, they're scheduled. First Saturday in November, they go to Troy. So you guys get them at home next year.
Yeah, I was excited about that. And like, I said Troy doesn't have a history with them, but at the same time, I'm a person who likes a lot of college football history. And so La Tech has a ton of history. So from that aspect, bringing that into the Sun Belt, I really like it because it makes the conference itself a little more grander or grandiose in a way. And, just adds to that richness of all the different schools.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you said WK, that ideally would have been who you would have, first choice for you.
Yeah. Probably. So when they were, I'm trying to remember the exact years, it was like 08 or 09. They came into the Sun Belt originally when they moved up from FCS, and they were there until I think 13 was when they left. So the original 5 that left went out, and then they were out the next year. Their problem right now is
I forgot that I didn't know that it wasn't the same year. Okay.
Right. And I had forgotten that for years because I wasn't paying too much attention at the time. But for them, I didn't dislike them as much as I did the others that left because, one, we hadn't been playing them as long, but two, it didn't feel like they were necessarily stepping away just for the money. It was like, okay, well, we're a brand new team. We've only been here for a few years. We're going to go Conference USA, which I will say at the time was the better move. You can talk anything about Conference USA versus Sun Belt now, but in 2012, I wanted Troy to go to Conference USA. That was where it felt like the G6, or I guess G5 at that point, the teams needed to go to be successful. It didn't end up working that way.
Some of that dominant at the time was you had some of the teams they replaced went to the old Big East, so you had all that movement going on. Who was it? FAU, Middle, FIU. I can't remember the fifth one.
If you hadn't asked me, I could have told you. North Texas.
Okay. I was gonna ask UAB, but okay, North Texas. Okay.
No, I'd have to go back and look at the old one, but I think UAB was only in the Sun Belt like in maybe the 80s, whenever it was still just a basketball league.
Gotcha. Oh, yeah, they left in 1991. Yes, so that would have been then. Them and UNC Charlotte left the same year, and I didn't think Charlotte was playing football then. So, yeah. But that's a good Sun Belt history, and last year for Troy. So now let's go looking at this year. So post bowl game, how's the roster been? Obviously, you guys lost Tay Meadows to Auburn, DJ Epps to West Virginia. What does the rest of the roster look like? Both your QBs are back.
Right. So really the biggest thing that most Troy fans are excited about actually doesn't have as much to do with the roster itself. It's Adam Austin coming in as a new OC. The offense was okay last year. I don't think anybody get mad at me for saying that was only okay. We had shimmers and glimmers of it being better, but we didn't score points. So he's coming in from Tarleton State, and they had, I'm trying to remember my numbers, they were the number 1 points per game offense in all of FCS, and they were the second highest ranked in all of Division I when it comes to points per game. And
impressive. Yeah.
It's just a super quick offense, both Goose and. Yeah.
I talked a little bit about them when I had Sam Houston guy on a couple months ago.
Right.
Because when I had coached before, was at Northwestern State. Todd Witten, who's at Tarleton now, was Sam Houston's coach back then. So some of our viewers some of these names might be connected and crossing up for our viewers. So, but yeah, Adam Austin though, yeah. Keep going.
They were talking about how, as they were getting in the new offense during spring practice, that it was moving much quicker. They could get the ball out much faster, which was extremely exciting because our offensive line, they were doing their best, but we kept getting sack after sack after sack. I'd have to go back and actually look at numbers on how many sacks we ended up with, but it was way more than we needed. But with that, it gives us a new little bit of life when it comes to the offense. And what I'm kind of hoping is that it's kind of a resurgence of what happened about 20 years ago. We had run, your standard pro set I formation, and it wasn't working. 2005, which was my first year at Troy, we just had a terrible year. I think we went 4-7, and we hired Tony Franklin, who was the progenitor of this iteration, at least of that part of the spread offense.
Last year, yep,
exactly. And so we end up winning 5 straight Sun Belt titles. So I'm hoping that bringing in somebody with this new and innovative offense will kind of spark something like that. I will say this much. I told you I do tangents sometimes. I don't usually make big, bold claims, but with the way the Sun Belt is, because we were talking about parity earlier, I don't see anybody going on a 5 championship run anymore, especially with NIL and all these things. 2, maybe 3, sure. I think App had 4 a couple of years back, but
another caveat there too, like a variable in any G6 conference doing that, your coach is probably going to get picked off by a power.
For sure.
If you do
yes.
that.
You're probably going to get 3 at most out of that coach, and then he's gone.
Yeah, it's and you talk about when you said App did it. Well, you had Jerry Moore that was a lifer there. That's why it happened. Yeah.
And so there's tons of stuff as far as that goes. Also with the offense coming back, we do have Jordan Lovett. He only had about 300 yards, but again, he was 3rd string last year. I think this is going to give him an opportunity to really kind of step up, fight for that starting role. One guy I wouldn't mind seeing get more reps is DeWitt Betterson Jr., who is the son of a legendary running back from Troy, DeWitt Betterson, who up until Kamani Vidal broke his record was the all-time leading rusher in Troy history. So having his son there as a running back is kind of interesting, and also makes me feel a little old because he was one of those early players I remember seeing.
Yeah, that's cool.
Another guy I will tell you to watch out for is one of the best players, and I don't say stuff like this, offhandedly. One of the legitimate best players I've ever seen on a football field is one of our wide receivers, Juwan Boyd. He's actually a Troy homegrown product. He went to Charles Henderson, the high school in town, and they had to come play the high school that I teach at, and the kid caught, I'd have to go really find the stats, maybe 10 passes, ended up with about 215 yards and a couple of touchdowns, and was just all over the place. And he hasn't really had a chance to have any success yet because we've had so many other wide receivers. But I think we lost 4 to the portal.
Last year, Epson Thomas just had so many more targets than anybody else.
Right. And so with those 4 gone, I think that opens up a spot to where Boyd can finally start working towards that number 1 or the wide receiver number 1 spot. So definitely keep an eye out for him.
One guy at receiver I wanted to ask about, just because he physically on paper, the guy looks like a dude. Christian Tate. Will he be one of the guys on the outside?
I think so. I do need to do a little more study on everybody. I didn't get to go to the spring game this year, so I don't know as much.
This time of year, it's tough, yeah.
Well, I mean, honestly, this part of the year is the greatest time for a football fan. I call it Schrodinger's football season because you're either going to have a great year or it's going to be the worst season ever, but you don't know what you're going to get. But yeah, I'm really excited to see what these wide receivers are going to be able to do. Christian Tate does have, good size, and I think could do some wonders on the outside, getting down the field and stretching the defense.
Good. Yeah, that's he was one of those guys that I was very curious about in what we might see from him in 2026. And then the other guy who, look, and not that PFF grades are everything and we should live and die by them. But one of whom numbers were decent when he was in last year was Elijah Prather at left tackle. So he could be a solid guy up front.
I think so. Like I said, one of our issues was offensive line. It was we had a mixed bag. I'd have to go back and look, but I think we went 9 straight games without using the same starting line. But Elijah Prather, he's going to be fantastic. He was great last year. He's going to continue being great. We also have Caleb Ash, who's coming back, and Tyler Cappy. Those 3 are going to be pretty good. We also have Gavin Bolin, who saw a little bit of time last year. But then I'm trying to remember that guy in the portal. Oh, a guy named Jordan Jones. He was at Ohio last year. Started all 13 games, was second team All MAC, is coming in as an offensive tackle. And so he's one guy that I'm really excited to see how he's going to end up fitting on the offensive line to help us out there.
They're usually pretty good on the trenches too. So
for sure. Yeah. So Ohio has always been good as far as that goes. So getting somebody with some talent from them, I'm very much a fan of.
Okay. And then at the QB position, I think you guys are probably in a better spot than most teams in the Sun Belt with both Crowder and Kilcrease coming back. Like they're almost unheard of at this, juncture of college football to bring your 1 and 2 guys back in the same year. So what do you expect out of those two? Like, will Crowder be the guy, or do you think there's a chance that Kilcrease could be the guy?
I do think it's going to end up being Goose, just because I think I will say this because I don't want to insult Tucker, because I do think he's good and he comes in and he's been clutch in many, many times over the past 2 years, especially when Goose went down. But I just feel like watching them play, Goose has just edged him out a little bit. There's just something about his game that I think works a little bit better. The team seems to play a little bit better. But like I said, Tucker's done well. So you are correct. It's an unprecedented spot to actually get both quarterbacks to come back. And that speaks a lot to the program that Gerad Parker is building, that you have kids who, one of them is going to be the backup and they're still willing to stay. So that's a pretty big thing. But even past that, if you go and look at the depth chart on quarterback, we've got a guy who I'm hopeful eventually he'll be able to get some starts, is a guy from Kentucky named Jack James. And he's from the same high school that Corey Robinson, who was Troy's great quarterback in the early 2010s. And actually Corey's I don't remember if he's quarterbacks or tight ends, but he's on the offensive staff at Troy right now. And so he's somebody that if something happens, God forbid, and both of the starters go down, I think Jack James could come in and play pretty well there as well. So it's not just the 1 and the 2, it's the 3 as well. And
impressive.
The other one that was intriguing when I was looking over the transfers in is a kid named Jaden Pete, who came over from Tarleton. Now, he doesn't have any stats that I could find, but he knows the system.
Logically, it would make sense that in 2 or 3 years he would be the guy. Yes.
And so that's one of those where when I saw that, my ears kind of perked up and I was like, all right, that could be very interesting.
I like to see that.
Something to keep an eye out.
If your new O coordinator thought enough to bring you with him, that tells me something. Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
So I think that's good. Then defensive side of the ball. One thing I like about you guys, and I'm glad I finally get to talk about this with someone. When I started writing for Farrell a couple years ago, and a lot of the stuff I read about is coaching carousel, different coaching related things. And one of my early articles was position coaches to watch for. And I did it so one coach from each position. At safeties, I had Dante Wright, who was at West Virginia at the time. And now he's your guys' D coordinator. So how have things been on the defensive side of the ball with Wright? I mean, we know they were solid last year, but what's the outlook on that side of the ball?
Honestly, one of the things, and it's it's something that's changed with me the longer I've watched the game and I've tried to understand it, because I'm never going to sit here and tell you I know as much as anybody, but I always try and learn more. I used to be all about offense. It's kind of like with baseball. Everybody loves the long ball, but the more I start watching the way that these Troy teams have been built the past 10 years or so, defense has become that real paramount issue. If we don't have a defense, we have nothing. You really saw that during John Summerall's time, where we had defenses that would knock you in the mouth. And I think Dante Wright has been working pretty well on getting that back in Troy. In the 90s, I don't know exactly when it came up or who came up with it or when it started, but I do know it was in the 90s. The nickname for Troy was the mighty Trojan Death Machine. And so when the defense is coming out and they're playing, that's who we want to see. We want to see the mighty Trojan Death Machine out there just knocking people's heads off. And I think, based on what I saw, we didn't really lose a ton of players on the defensive side. The main ones that I know we kept were Donnie Smith, Cam Curry, Luke Hodges. We also have Justin Poe, who is a phenomenal player, and Jordan Perry. All of them are coming back, and they're bringing a ton of experience with them. And so if they can use that, and I'm trying to remember there was two guys that we got coming in that were very intriguing. They're FCS call-ups. So there's a linebacker from Barton College named Keno Jones. Last year, he had 114 tackles, 16 and a half for loss, and 5 sacks.
Unbelievable amount of tackles.
Yeah, I mean, that's for us, that's Carlton Marshall worthy, where you're getting that many. But there's also a safety named Kenai Cook from Charleston Southern. He had 55 tackles, 1.5 for loss, and 3 forced fumbles. So if those two guys can get integrated with what we already have, Troy's going to have a phenomenal defense this year.
Good. Yeah. Everybody, focusing on with JMU last year, it was like you talked about, people like the offense, but going back several years to you guys with Summerall, Marshall a couple years ago, JMU last year, the teams with the best defenses in the conference have been winning the conference, or at least they're at the finish line to compete for it.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, you probably heard as long as I had that old adage, defense wins championships. I didn't understand it until I got older, because again, I grew up, I want to see the long passes. I want to see the long runs. I want to see the points being scored. But honestly, outside of the Big 12 from like the mid 2000s, you don't see teams with huge offenses being the ones winning championships. You're going to need low scoring games. You're going to need
one of my favorite football tweets ever was a Texas Tech linebacker that was the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Week. And the retweet was, "This is the most fitting thing ever about the Big 12. You give Defensive Player of the Week to a linebacker whose team allowed 600 yards to an FCS team." That was kind of it.
I mean,
and they won
the
game they won 55-40 or something like that. Yeah.
And honestly, that's one of those, and there's so many things about the whole realignment thing and everybody playing in different conferences, but that's one of the things that I really missed, is that completely unhinged, all-out offense of that mid-2000s Big 12, where you could turn it on and it could be, Baylor versus Texas Tech, or it could be, really even Baylor versus Texas, and at least one of them is going to be hanging 40 points on the other.
And you had so many just personalities too. I mean, Mike Leach, Dana Holgerson, Art Briles, Texas and Oklahoma were competitive every year. Bill Snyder was still hanging around at Kansas State at the time they were playing well. Iowa State finally got in Campbell and started winning games. Kansas, when they had Mangino, and then were terrible in between until they got Leopold.
Yeah. And it's again one of those things where you had to be there. There's no way, just you mentioning Mark Mangino, there's no way that if you tell someone about Mark Mangino and that Kansas team, it doesn't seem believable.
Yeah.
But I was there, I saw it.
Yeah. And then the follow-up to me, oh yeah, and this is a picture of the guy too. Like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like that. All right, that guy, he won football games. Okay.
Yeah.
Like,
and dollar signs was one of the greatest press conferences ever. So awesome. Yeah. But let's going into this year. What we've touched on a little bit, but we'll start with actually, we can pick which division in the Sun Belt do you want to talk about first? Do you want to stay in the West or go East a little bit?
yeah, let's talk about the West first.
Okay.
I just know it a little bit better.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm not saying this to pat you on the back. I have said it to a few people. I think Troy will win the division this year in the West. For me, we talked about the QBs and a lot of the continuity they have on the roster. They would be my pick to win it right now. Who else do you think will be in there? I won't put you on the spot with picking the home team right now. Who else do you think will be in the running? One team, we had kind of mentioned this. I hate to count out Arkansas State for how much they can kind of just be those guys that are always there.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, so my rule, and it actually goes back to the 2016 Clemson game. Every year in my classroom during football season, I take 10 games and I let the kids pick against me. And every single one, does not matter who we're playing. We could be playing the 1985 Chicago Bears. I will always pick Troy, because the one time I didn't, I was like, let me just get a win, right? Clemson's going to beat us. So I picked Clemson that week, and then they only beat us 30-24. But it was like, okay, my team almost made me look like a fool. I'm never not picking them.
Yep.
But if you said, hey, you can't pick Troy, I think, honestly, I would probably end up going to Southern Miss. I mean, they were right there last year. Blake Anderson, we know, is a good coach. He knows what the Sun Belt is.
Yeah.
He built a great program, after all the other 1,000 coaches that were there at Arkansas State. He came in, had consistency. Obviously, there was some tragic circumstances that caused him to end up having to leave Arkansas State. But
and I don't think it's a stretch to say, had that tragic family stuff not happened, he may have had another 2 or 3 years there and could be at a P4 school by this point. I think he's that caliber of coach.
And I do too. He's, I would say if you were going in top 10 Sun Belt coaches, I wouldn't argue at you putting him in that top 10. I'm not sure where. I'd have to really look at it, but
funny you say that. So I did a hottest to coldest list. I've done it for every conference. In my last week's episode, we've talked ACC and SEC about it with different guests. So I'll tell you where this is not necessarily ranking them as, how I would put them, but it's on the hottest seat. So not best necessarily, but I'll tell you on the hottest seat, I have Del McGee. Tough to argue with that. Georgia State has not been good. Second hottest, Major, South Alabama. I don't know how we don't know. They've also not been the most patient over time. Clay Helton at third, just because you feel like as good as they are, some of their fans are not happy with where they are.
No, they're not.
Yeah. Fourth was Billy Napier, just because good coach, was good in the Sun Belt. Their expectations are a little up though at JMU. They probably have the highest expectations in the conference. If he has a bad year or two, it's going to be, same old Billy that he was at Florida. Let's get rid of him.
Right. Well, see, to me, Billy is probably one of the, I don't want to say scary, but one of the more dangerous coaches whenever it comes to him now. Because, I watched him with Louisiana and how he did there, how he recruited. He got huge guys to come in, especially on the defensive and offensive lines. But now we have NIL.
In the NFL now it's started guard. Yeah.
Right. And so now we have NIL, and JMU has a lot of money. So him paired with their money could be something that is very, very dangerous, especially in the West, if not in the conference, the East, if not in the conference overall.
Yeah.
It might take him a year, but I think that's going to be something that's going to be really interesting to watch.
Very fair. Yeah. After those four, for me, the next group of 5, 6-ish got really tough. At 5, I did have Brian Vincent. I think he's a heck of a coach, but at only 3-9, the record just wasn't great last year. So we'll see what happens there moving forward. Like you said, he's another guy that stays in games, but he was there. Ryan Beard at Coastal was 6th. We know, after the Tim Beck experience, they just have a quick trigger, and teams are more likely going to do that now. I do think he was a decent. He did well at Missouri State, bringing them up from FCS. So Beard was 6. I put my hometown guy Tony Gibson at 7. Marshall's another. Like I didn't know it as much till I moved here. Marshall's pretty demanding though. They do expect a lot, and I will also be. I might take the scorn from some of my Marshall people. After 2 years ago when we won the conference, our fan base was so insufferable on social media for a few months there that I don't know why it happened, but it did. And you feel free to agree with that or disagree, but
it happens to everybody. I'm sure,
it does.
And everybody's
and the just the way with Huff leaving right away made it 100 times worse too. And I'm one of you. I almost totally blame the athletic director in that case, because my thought is, you're winning your division, you're going to a conference title game, get that extension across the finish line. I don't care what it takes. Do it.
Yeah, that was one where I've not really been shocked a lot of times about moves in the Sun Belt, especially from one to another. That one shocked me because I was like, why don't you pay the man? He just won you a division title and then got you a championship. Pay the man.
It might have been beyond that, but
I'm sure there was probably something else that we don't know about, but
anyway, Gibson was at 7 for me. Dowell Logain's at 8, 5 and 8, and similar to Coastal, App State had a pretty quick hook before him too. So I don't know that their grace period won't be the longest. Desmero at 9, again, a losing record last year. I think being a hometown guy and a alum there gives him a longer leash than most, but that patience also might be wearing thin. At 10, I had Butch. Butch is safe. They would have to go 1-11 to fire Butch. They like him there, and they got a good thing going with him too. At number 11, I had Cumbie. I think after going 8-5 last year and moving conferences, I think Tech is really liking the stability with him now, and they would tolerate a lot, I think, in moving conferences.
Right.
12. I put Parker at 12, out of the 14. So, my quote was the year 2 turnaround. You can't argue with that. He was 12. At 13 was Blake Anderson. I think just being in the first year helps him a lot. The kind of a continuity hire, so to speak.
Right.
And then Ricky Ronnie was the safest guy after, winning 10 games last year. And he also got a pretty good extension, which is going to give him more, grace period there. So I had Ronnie as the safest one.
And honestly, like ODU had such a massive jump last year from where they were previous couple of years. And so I really think they could make a run for it in the East this year.
Good. Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me.
And it's a few guys that I've talked to who are still coaching. They, even when they were losing, they loved the guy. Like they said, Ronnie's a better coach than Brett, right? These guys had back in their Penn State days and stuff. They're like, Ronnie's a great coach. Like they really liked him. And to him, man, like, he really knows what he's doing. And they said he's the most detail-oriented person they've ever been around. So nothing but good things to say about him. And like the one thing I had asked these guys was, okay, you lost Colton Joseph to Wisconsin. Now, what are you going to do, with the next QB? I figured they'd go in the portal and get someone. They said Ronnie and the coaches there are raving about that Hennikel, or I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, but it's Hennikel, something like that. But will be a redshirt sophomore this year. Apparently, they love the guy and think he's going to be really good. So
yeah, I mean, I'm all about trying to bring somebody in as a freshman and then get them where they need to be, rather than having to go to the portal every year.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I agree with you there. So, but to back on what you were saying, I'm also pretty high on ODU, but back to so that was, we kind of got off on the tangent about the coaches, but that's okay. But West-wise, yeah, Southern Miss I think will be competitive again with Blake Anderson, and ULM I think is going to just steadily get better. 3-9 last year. For them, I think it would be going to a bowl game would be a win. Probably that's probably the goal.
I think it'd be great for them.
Point, yeah. I think I was trying. So I think Southern Miss's QB is that Lynn or Liddy. He's been at La Tech and UAB in his career, and is at Southern Miss now. I think he will end up being the guy. But I also know that Ethan Hampton, who was a backup at Illinois last year, transferred to Southern Miss. So we'll see what happens with the spring and fall battle for the QB job at Southern Miss. But they do return, especially in the run game and on defense. They do return a decent amount. So I think I'm leaning Troy to win the West, but I won't force it upon you to make a bold prediction.
Yeah, you may have to twist my arm to say that Troy's going to win. So
okay, now in the East, and if I was picking right now, had to pick a winner today, God, I don't want to be that guy that picks both teams to repeat, but it's tough now. I think JMU is going to be solid again. Yeah. And I think Georgia Southern's going to be solid with Helton again. So, well I mean,
I agree with you there.
Yeah.
I'm the type where, and this even goes to like the pros. Like, I think if you're the champ, you have to be assumed to continue until you don't. So if you win the division, you're the one with the target on your back. So JMU's got that target in the East. Troy has that in the West. So they're my picks until something says different.
Yeah. I'm curious how Max Johnson does at Georgia Southern now. And Helton, that's one thing he's good with his QBs.
Yeah. So. He's been fantastic. Even when he was at USC and things weren't looking well, the quarterback play was good.
Yeah. All those guys are playing in the NFL and making millions of dollars now that he coaches QB. So I'll give that to him. One thing, we're at about our hour mark, a little over, which is okay. But I always ask two things of our viewers at the end, one of which something we just talked about, another one will be a little more of a thinker, but which coach in the Sun Belt is on the hottest seat? I said Del McGee. Who would you say? And you can feel free to say McGee as well if you want, but if you have another one, I would love to hear it.
I mean, I would say Dell's the obvious choice. The only one that I think would be closer would be Major Applewhite. And this isn't even me being biased as far as Troy, but it's the fact that you had Rob Ezell and the offense was good. They were, I think, 7-6 in his first year.
Yep.
Rob Ezell leaves. He brings in Paul Petrino, which Paul Petrino, for older Sunbelt fans, he was the guy who was at Idaho when they were still in the Sunbelt. They weren't good. And South wasn't good last year. They dropped 4-8. And so he got rid of Paul Petrino, and now Major's going to be his own OC. And I respect.
I didn't know. I knew they got rid of Petrino. I didn't know Major was going to be the play caller.
I didn't either until I was looking at it today, and I was like, oh, they got rid of Petrino. Who's going to be? And then it was Major Applewhite will be his own offensive coordinator. He'll call the plays. And I feel like that's kind of your sign that there's some heat there, because if he's willing to do that in year 3, then there's something going on.
I'm okay with that mindset of, if you know this is last chance saloon, I want to be the guy that relies on myself to do it, not somebody else.
Right. And I do respect that out of Major.
Massive D coordinator hire in Todd Orlando for South Alabama, though. That dude has been in a lot of Texas, Houston, USC. I actually was with Helton at USC. And South Florida, dude's been all over. So that was a good DC hire for Major. But
so they would be the only ones I could compete with as far as the hottest seat, just because they know they can win there.
Yeah. The other one with Major that I don't want to say leads me to believe he's not a great head coach, but that's basically what I'm going to say is, you look at both Houston and South Alabama, he's taken over in really good spots from good coaches. His best years have been right away. Then as it's been more and more his players, they've gotten worse and worse. That's not good. So that leads me to believe, and with Major, if that happens a second time, you might be a coordinator and assistant coach the rest of your career. If this is bad, I don't know that he's a head coach again.
And it's like I said earlier, there's some leeway, but we like winning in the state of Alabama. If you can't do that, you're not going to be able to stay there. And I know South is still, an infant program compared to some of the other schools here, but they got a taste of it under Kane Womack. So they know what they can do and they know what they want to do. It really just depends on if Major can get it done.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then the other question I always ask that might be a little more of a thinker, which coach in the Sun Belt do you think would be the most likely with a good season to get a power conference or an elite job?
Ooh, that is good. I mean, your obvious choices are, I think, top of my head would be Blake Anderson and Billy Napier. Billy's already done that. Blake Anderson probably should have, but with everything going on, he ends up going to Utah State. So those would be the top ones. I really think if Gerad Parker can string some things around the next 2 years, I don't think he'd make a jump after this, but after year 4, I think that could be something that would be there.
And he would be up there for me too. And I always look at potentially available jobs in this case. And if Will Stein lights it on fire, Parker would be a guy potentially at Kentucky, and a place he was a former assistant. If Duke has another good year and Manny Diaz goes somewhere, Parker could be a Duke candidate. And I think if you're him, you would take either of those jobs. Right.
I mean, of course, you kind of have to at that point. I think it'd be funny that, especially with Summerall, who, was obviously so good here at Troy. The thinking was at one point when it looked like Mark Stoops was out, it was like, oh, well, Summerall's going to go to Kentucky. It would just be very funny if Kentucky finally did take a Troy coach with Kentucky connections after 3 out of the last 4 being one of those.
The irony there is something I hadn't thought about. That is good. Yeah. Do you think there's any case where a P4 school, and it would be a middle or lower one, would kick the tires on Butch again, or his day's done at the Power 4 level? Because I wouldn't say a team that was poor but had a coaching turnover. I'm trying to I don't know. Purdue has struggled. Kansas, has been down the last couple of years. But just think about our power conference teams who've been poor. I wouldn't hate it if one of them hired Butch. Do you think there's any case it would happen?
I'm about 70% no, just because I feel like, and I have nothing against Butch. Like I've never met the guy, but like I don't dislike him as a coach. I thought he said some crazy things in his philosophy, like the bricks and all that stuff. But I don't have any ill will against him. But I think that the Tennessee flameout was so publicized and so big that I think a lot of people have backed off of that potential of him going back to a P4 job. If he did, great. I mean, I'd be happy for him. But it's just, I feel like that was kind of like Helton at USC. where it
No,
was
I think
just
that's a fair
so out there and it was so blatant how bad it ended up being that them being the front runner for any job it's not there.
I think the one scenario I could see it would be if Satterfield doesn't make it much longer at Cincinnati, maybe Butch would go back there. I think that might be the one school that would take him because he was.
I think that'd be fantastic. Yeah. I think it'll be a good spot for him to go back to, because it doesn't always work out, but there are those times where a coach goes back to that previous school and it does work. So I hadn't thought about Cincinnati, but that would be a good one for him.
Yeah, but and I think we'll see more with the going back. How does it work with Rich Rod? How does it work with Scott Frost? That might dictate the mindset for other schools based on how those two do.
Right.
But we've reached our time, Ben. But I just wanted to say thank you for being here. And as usual, the fans can see your contact here on the ticker, and I'll tag all that stuff for them to easily follow you. But want to just say thank you for being here, and I appreciate having you.
Hey, well, I appreciate it, Mike. It was a pleasure getting to talk to you and just talk about a whole bunch of stuff. So it was fun.
Absolutely.